I guess I'm going to take a little bit of exception to the notion that if we want to take Tampa for the example, I'm going to guess you could count the number of times on one hand um, that Stamkos wasn't on his offside one-timer side, and that Kucherov wasn't the setup guy, and that Hedman wasn't at the top. The other two guys might be a little bit more interchangeable, but I think they do have a structure, obviously.
Sure.
They do have assigned roles, I think, obviously. Um, but they are prepared to, as they should be, if something breaks down and somebody's got to go get a puck first and they can't, they might not get to those spots right away, but they're going to find their way back to those spots. And so I always sound like a broken record. I don't think it's one way or the other. It's in between. Like you have a structure, like every team's going to have somebody. Like Washington's got a Backstrom. Why would you want Backstrom in front of the net trying to tip and battle with a D or playing the bumper? His skill and his strength and is to be that distributor guy. And so he wants to be in that spot. The team wants and needs him to be in that spot as much as possible. There might be a time he ends up on the goal line and Kuznetsov is the distributor guy on the side. Like, I'm not saying that never happens, but I think A, they do have a structure. B, they do have assigned roles. C, they all know their options. And the biggest thing we're sort of missing when you go down to the lower, they all are really, really intelligent hockey players who know how to read and react. So I don't think you play without structure and totally on concepts. Concepts are important. And I don't think you play riveted to a spot with, no creativity. Hockey is the in between. Hockey is the read and react and the sense of the game. So just a little bit of.
Yeah, and I agree, but I would, my counter argument there would be, so we all know Ovechkin is off to the side. We all know that they're waiting for the shot. And so, but their ability is to be able to move guys into different spots, because you'll see Carlson sometimes come off the other side. He'll come down. Ovechkin will come up to the top. Sometimes he comes in the middle based on what they're doing. And you're right. You want Nick Backstrom with the puck. You want him to be able to make those plays. But the adaptability to be able to adapt what the other teams are doing. And you got to remember in the playoffs, these guys are playing each other 7 times. Like, the differences in what they're able to change is so minute, but they have to be able to be able to adapt and to react off of plays, right? It's not because people don't want up ice forecheck on them. They just realize that more often than not, they're going to get stung anyways, right? They're going to get stung to be able, because they have such an ability to be able to score off the rush. It's not because they don't want to. If that were the case, like Calgary's power play or penalty kill, they want to try to disrupt and get everybody out of sync and everything else. So I agree with you, Tim, that there's guys and there has to be a plan and there has to be everything else. But those guys are waiting off of cues and their ability. And you're right, their ability to make plays and to see it and to be able to react. I would like to see the stat on how many times they've scored off the rush. Like Boston would score off the rush constantly, and you couldn't tell the difference between the 5-on-5 and the 5-on-4. And a lot of it was because they're so reactive. This year in the playoffs, they try to set up and get everybody get to their spots. And you'd see Butchie on the bench being like, why aren't we shooting the puck? Why are we reacting to it? Because it's that need, that want. Okay, you got your spot. Now we're going to run our play. So I agree with you, Tim. There has to be a plan. There has to be a method to what's going on. But I think less and less you're going to see guys like, okay, I'm Ovi, I'm over on the side, or I'm Stamkos, I'm on the side, because teams they're just getting the ability to be able to get you out of that structure at. They have more of the ability to that, because now they're going to be using 4 lines of guys, 5 lines of guys to be able to keep that pressure, right? There was amount of time where they had 2 sets of PK or 3 sets of PK, and then they would send, and guys couldn't tire, so they're like, okay, we got to let them set up. But now they're going to use more and more of their bench. Guys are going to be less of the Ryan Reeves, and there'll be more of the Andrew Mangiapane. Now those guys have to kill, so we can keep up the tempo. We can drive it, so you can't get to your spots. So I guess I'm agreeing with you, but on the other side, I think that the way they're using more of the lineup, there's more guys being able to play. Like Ryan Reeves isn't going to play all the games, right? They're going to have more guys that can be in those roles, and you can get them out of their position. So there's more of the emphasis on being able to have to do things organically and off the rush.
Well, so, and before you respond, Wally, just to respond, a couple of things. I would totally agree, and it has to be a concept on the power play. If you have an opportunity, and you have to be able to read this, to attack off the rush, absolutely. Like, you can create a 3-on-2 or a little mini 2-on-1 on entry that creates an advantage. You have to be able to read, can we attack the net, or do we need to settle for possession? That's critical. So I'd agree with that point. And I would also agree, we talked last spring about, all the time off coaches had with the COVID stuff. Would anything new emerge tactically in the NHL? And one of the things we talked about that is still out there, and I still don't see, and it's what you're talking about, is more movement on the power play. There is some, not nearly as much as there could be, even if you sort of give them a canned, like you're saying, sort of some block options. And I'm sure Washington does that. I'm sure a lot of teams do that. Some block options in terms of, okay, if we're not getting anything doing, let's try this. Like, get these players moving, exchanging positions. There's that's still underutilized, I feel, in the NHL. And last point, sort of on the PK, I see it the same way as the power play. There has to be a read and react element, and which what we're trying to do with the Danish girls is we want to be aggressive up ice, even against a team like Canada, if we're lucky enough to play them. If we have an opportunity to get up the ice and pressure them when their backs are turned, and we can get in and force a weak pass and have our second forward force that second pass, we want to do that. But we also have to recognize there are going to be lots of situations where we don't have the advantage, and so we have to go into a more passive mode. So penalty killing, like the power play, read and react and hockey sense is a huge piece of it.
Yeah, and if I could add, so a couple things. I think part of the reasons why teams are able to come in and be able to have that set is because they don't use as much of the bench, right? And you can see now these teams are having more and more players be involved, and because you're right, like we played against the Ducks farm team, and they led the American League in goals and shorthanded goals for, and it's because they had guys were coming, like they had like 4 units of guys, and everybody can skate now. There's not many guys that can't skate, and they were constantly putting us under pressure, constantly, and it was tough for our guys to be able to deal with that pressure. So on the PK side, for me, that's a huge thing, but you have to have the guys that be able to do it. What happens a lot of times is the best player will be like, well, why am I not PKing? Because the best player wants to play every situation. And so, it's obviously goes to a different story as far as for management, bench management and everything else. But, so I think that's a big thing. And then the second point I wanted to make is, and they dealt with this, I'm sure they dealt with it in Washington, I'm sure that they've dealt with it in Calgary, is certain players want to be where they want to be, right? Like Johnny Gaudreau had 100 points, right? And he wants to be in a certain spot where he scored those points. He wants to get the puck in the drop. And part of me is like, you know what? I get it. But at some point in time, if it's not working, whatever as a coach, you want to go back to that. It's the same thing on the PK. The Calgary's potentially changing their PK. Why? Because they've got 2 guys that played a certain way from another organization that wanted to be played that way. Calgary's PK was eighth in the league. Why would you need to change anything? Right? But it comes down to, listening to the players, what they want. But at the same time, players are going to want what they want to do because they're used to doing what they want to do. Ovi's on the side there. I'm pretty sure he's not being like, I'm not going standing over there, right? So as long as it's working, they're going to keep doing it, right? So just kind of on your point as far as movement, because I agree, Tim, but you're going to get these guys, wanting to be in their spot. Like I talking with Andy O'Brien, telling me with Sid, Gino just goes wherever he wants to go, and Sid just kind of fills in, right? That's why Pitt's power play, like you look at Pittsburgh's power play, you take a look at it, he goes, what are they doing? You have no idea what they're doing, because if Gino wants to go down to the goal line, he goes down to the goal line. If he wants to be on the point, he goes up to the point. And now they're adjusting and figuring out that way. So